Good morning. You've got me on a Sunday morning getting ready to go to church and worship with the community and also deliver a message. And today I'm going to be at a church where there is no streaming. Can you believe it? And I thought what I'd do this morning, share with you some of my thoughts as I'm getting ready to deliver a sermon today, especially on a week like this where so many things are dynamic, moving around, and so many changes, not only from day to day, but hour to hour. And, our lives have changed. Our lives have changed from just 3 months ago, before COVID-19. I call that BC, before COVID. And just 2 weeks ago, with the killing of George Floyd. And what we're seeing on the streets, the demonstration. First of all, I'm just excited to see so many people that are that want to take responsibility, that want to participate. And I think there's the timing. Everything has come in really together. People have been home for how many months? There's been a lot of unrest. The pandemic is going on. What happens over there in Minneapolis with George Floyd, and it sparks an entire. Not, I used to say just the country. Sure, it was just the city, but the country. But now everywhere. I just got a call yesterday from Armenia. People are protesting over there. Black Lives Matter. So I want to share with you some of the ideas that are going through my head today as I get ready for church and get ready to share a message with a community. First of all, demonstration for me in my life has been very important. I grew up in a time here in America where there was a lot of distrust for government. Our president was shot in broad daylight, John Kennedy. A few years later, his brother, Martin Luther King, shot. Dreams that we talk about were almost like finished. We saw a corrupt White House with the Watergate, and it made us distrust things. Now, I don't want you to think like I'm one of those conspiracy guys. I don't believe in a flat Earth. I believe it's round, and the space launches were all real to me. In fact, so much so that until today, I watched them. But what I'm saying is that there was a lot of distrust. There was a lot of reasons to protest. We grew up with not only Watergate, but also with Woodstock. We grew up with a generation of music that defined that distrust. Stephen Stills, it just still echoes in my head when I see the demonstrators out there these last few days. Hey, look over there, with a man with a gun over there. You've got to beware. It's time we stop. Children, look. What's that sound? Everybody, look what's going down. There's a whole generation. There's a whole generation of folk music, of rock music that really defined a generation in protest. So I come from that background, and myself have participated in so many different protests. But I want to focus in on what's happened, because who cares what I've done, right? But a couple of incidents that happened in my life, and I want to share those with you. First of all, back in the late 1980s, there was a freedom movement going on in Karabakh, which today we refer by its Armenian name Artsakh, but known throughout the world as Karabakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. And there was a freedom movement, and I was a priest in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we organized a lot of protest movements. And I'll never forget, we used our church for that protest movement. And one of our ladies in our church, married to an African-American gentleman who came to our protest at the Armenian church and helped in making those banners and those posters. And you got to remember that, handmade posters. We didn't have the luxury of these giant, huge machines and everything. So we were sitting there, and he shared with me his experiences during the 60s, during the 70s, during the civil rights movement. And it was very important that he came and participated with us, with an adopted community for him, and talk about Artsakh, what's going on in Karabakh. So, those protests I remember very distinctly. We were young, we were energetic, and we were going to make some noise about some inequality, injustice that's taking place on the other side of the globe. The following year, 1992, that was back, the protests were in 89, so a couple of years later, a couple of years it was going on, but 92 was the year that I want to jump to. We were at a clergy meeting, and this was a clergy meeting international for all Armenian priests and bishops had assembled in New York. And the bishop from Karabakh was coming. He was going to be one of the featured speakers. And we as the priests were sitting there, and we were going to ask him questions. What could we do as a faith community? How can we help out in what was going on in the protest movements, in bringing about peace, in bringing about understanding and harmony? And he got up, in a very big mountain man, as the land suggests that you have to kind of survival of the fittest, right? So this bishop got up in front of this group of clergymen, and he gave a report on what's going on in Karabakh, the atrocities, the pogroms, the massacres that had taken place, and how a group of Armenian faithful with cross in hand were able to overtake just incredible, we're able to go against incredible odds, right? So I'll never forget this. We were all assembled there, and we opened it up for questions. He says, "Are there any questions at the end?" And some of the priests raised their hand, and what can we do? Bishop, what can we do to help out? What can we do to help out the community in Artsakh, the community over there? And he said, pray. And immediately right after, yeah, we'll pray, but what can we do? What do you need? That was the question. What do you need over there? And this is such a typical American kind of way of approaching it. Like, what do you need? Make me a list, and I will take that list over to Costco, or I will phone it in, get you the supplies, and we'll mail it to you, or we'll send it to you, I mean, it was that mentality. What do you need? And second time he said, just pray for us. And we looked, yes, we will pray to you, but what do you need? And the third time, I'll never forget, he says, I need you to pray for us. And I think that was really a wake-up call that I didn't appreciate until later, kind of woke up from that, like really how important that prayer is, how important that focus is, how important the spiritual is when we're talking about change, when we're talking about change of heart. It was a few years later, I think, that these ideas came together when we started an organization with Armenian young kids called In His Shoes, basically walking in the shoes of others. Yeah, it's important that we love one another, but how do you understand that one another until you have some empathy, until you put your foot in the shoes of someone else and walk in their shoes? You can love them, but you can't really understand their pain. And it was in the year 2005 when we heard about the genocide going on in Darfur. It had been going on for a couple of years. We had heard about it here and there, but there was a movement that we latched onto, and we were able to go out there and protest. And that was basically divest from the people that are buying the guns. Okay, that's how easy it is. And California was invested in the Sudan in the tunes of $5-6 billion. And so I always thought to myself, like, wow, can you imagine if somebody had divested out of Turkey back in the earlier century, in 1915? Imagine if the Turks didn't have the weapons to come and kill the Armenians. What would we have had? Peace? So it was just like a no-brainer. But here's what we did. Instead of going out and just protesting, because we did a lot of that. We went out to the federal building, talk about Darfur, get Darfur out in front of the public. But we also went out door to door. And this is a bunch of Armenian kids coming together and going door to door, collecting signatures, collecting postcards. And we delivered it to the governor, Terminator, what was his name? And Schwarzenegger, Governor Schwarzenegger, and he signed the legislation which divested from the Sudan. And I felt very proud that not only myself, but a group of Armenian kids, we were out there on the forefront collecting these signatures, doing something, and the result of it was very obvious. We saw that result, okay? We were able to divest, and that means they weren't able to buy the guns. I'm saying these things because there's always opportunities to protest, but it's not just about that protest. And what I'm scared about right now is that we're talking about changing policies, we're changing laws and regulations, we're moving funding, but we're not changing heart. And that's what I want to share with you today. That's the message that I have today. It's about changing heart. We need to start changing our heart. How, you know, you know what? That human condition has always been there. There's always been people who feel they are more superior than the other. They are better than the other. And you know what? Religion has done its number too. I mean, just imagine within Christianity itself, there are different tiers and levels that people think, well, my brand of Christianity is better than yours. And so if it's better, what does it mean? Mine is more superior. These are dangerous concepts, and we've done this with people too. But here's what I have to say. You know, one of the safety nets is God, and it's as easy as this. If you believe in God and you believe that God is the author of life, there you go, right? That means everybody is a child of God. Not just you, everybody. And to me, this is why my Christian faith is so important to me, because that's what Jesus Christ taught. It wasn't about just a certain number of people were accepted by God, but basically everybody. It wasn't the elite. It wasn't the bourgeois. It was everybody has access to God. Thy kingdom come. You know, it's accessible by everybody. And how beautiful is that? How beautiful of an opportunity to be able to access all of the goodness. And if I believe that, what happens? I have no other choice but to look at everybody as a brother and sister. I have no other choice but to love one another. Now, this is what God in the equation. Obviously, there's so many people that don't believe in God. Okay, so how do we come about? How do we get this change of heart without entering God into the equation? And I think that one of the biggest difficulties is standing in our way. It's not about, like we don't pray or we don't, but it's about materialism. And I think this is just probably part of the bottom line of the problem. It's what we saw with the riots. I mean, you separate the people who are protesting from the rioters. What were the rioters after? There was nothing about the protest. The rioters were after basically material goods, about making it, right? Well, materialism is a biggie. It is a biggie because it's not only about getting those items that you want and looting and everything, but it's about the distinction by having those items. It's about, I have the ability to purchase those items. I have the ability to have those items. And the more I have, the more I can live a better life, a more peaceful life. We start thinking that, we start believing that. Remember a few years ago, or quite a few years ago, there was a little saying people would say, he who dies with the most toys wins. And then came the answer to that. He who dies with the most toys still dies. Yeah, you still die. And we all know you can't take it with you, but there is that want in life that I want to be comfortable. I want to provide for my children. I want to be able to do it. And perhaps we hide behind those things because it's really about us being in that comfort level and having those things. And what happens is all of a sudden we lose sight that those things that we thought were there for our comfort now become the symbols by which we judge one another. Who has what? Where do I stand? Where am I in that position? Where am I? What rung of the ladder am I on? So materialism is a bigger issue than we might think, and it becomes the God. It becomes God because what happens is we start. Our lives are dictated by that materialism, and you may not think that this is pertains to you, but it pertains to everybody. It's like the flow. It's like it's going. It's like the things. Hey, look at this. I'm talking to you because I have a smartphone. And what kind of smartphone I have really depends on who I'm able to communicate with. If you're watching me, okay, you're watching me because you have an internet connection. I'm not saying these things are bad. Please, just let it be really clear. I'm not talking against the advancement of society or advancement of technology, but what I'm talking about is all of a sudden these things become the way we start judging people. Do you have, do you not have, the haves and the have-nots. And they start defining those haves and have-nots. Now, this is one thing. I'm talking about change of heart. We need to be able to let loose of so many of these things. Not as far as losing these things as part of our life and the way we live, but as far as making them the items by which standards are laid down. The other thing is sensitivity. I think we are living in a time right now where we have been desensitized. And this is true from the early movies that we used to see people just shooting up people. And this is a bigger problem than you might think. It's not just about the movies. It's about the conditioning. I'm sure you've all seen sitcoms, right? What's famous about sitcoms on TV? They have laugh tracks, right? Have you ever thought about it, why those laugh tracks? Because most of those things that they say are not funny. So there is somebody, a producer somewhere, who is saying that we've got to get people to know that this is a joke. We don't mean this intentionally. We want you to laugh at it. I saw a commercial the other day, and I thought about the same thing. It was, I think, for the show, the After Roseanne, what's it called? The Connors. And two of them are sitting there, and they're talking about how they're rearing the kids. And it says, look at us, one an alcoholic and one a divorcee. Imagine us telling our kids what to do. And the laugh track is there. Ha, 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 ha. Well, this is tragedy. Hey, alcoholism is not funny, you know. Divorce, yeah, it happens in life, but there's a lot of pain that goes with it. It's not a ha-ha-ha moment, but the ha-ha-has are there. The laugh track is there to kind of like let us know that, okay, let your guards down. This is a moment not to be so sensitive. Unfortunately, what happens is we are no longer sensitive to some of the big issues. And we start things as simple as calling people names, as far as language. I know as an Armenian, I know that the word exterminate was used to exterminate Armenians by the Turks back in 1915. Now that word is a powerful word, because what do you exterminate? You exterminate rodents, you exterminate pests, right? I mean, that's okay. You call an exterminator to exterminate things that don't belong there. That word in itself is telling you that the thing that we're exterminating is not essential, is not necessary. It's the dehumanization, desensitization. A couple of years ago, we had a couple guests from Rwanda, genocide survivors. And late at night, we went for a walk, a couple, husband and wife. My wife and I were walking, and we're walking through the park, and so cockroaches actually went by us. For most people, yeah, you kind of like jump back, you go, ah, you know. For them, it was a traumatic experience. And later we found out why, because the dehumanization process, they were called cockroaches. Well, you know, if you could label somebody something that needs to be exterminated, then it's easy to exterminate. desensitization, okay? You start naming these people, they are no longer human, dehumanization. And I think this is happening all over. We start talking about groups of people. Black Lives Matter. Then people come and counter out, well, what about our lives and everything? Everybody's life matters. This morning I heard on one of the talk shows a gentleman saying, his mother had told him, it's not going to matter until a black mother's loss. In other words, a child of a black mother who dies is as important as a white mother's child who dies. In other words, that equality. When a black mother's child dies and people are outraged by that, that's when things will change. Well, that's what's happening right now. That's what's happening right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're seeing throughout the country. And this is very important. Now, we realize that, this sensitization, we are now becoming sensitive to the others. In other words, we're putting our feet in the shoes of others. The other day, I spoke about this. I said, until you put your foot in the shoe of someone else, you're not going to feel it. And somebody came back with, yeah, put your foot in the shoe of another and then walk a mile in their shoes. And then you'll be a mile farther to take their shoes. And, it was a ha-ha moment. But what does that do? That joke in itself is like basically saying, okay, I can't handle all this excitement right now. What I need to do is kind of like marginalize it. Let me make a joke out of it so we could kind of put it in aside. I don't have to confront it. No, these are moments that we need to be sensitive. And what I'm going to call for today through my sermon and when I go to church, my prayers, is that we start understanding that we are all part of a solution. Yes, I think we all get it. We're part of the problem. But we have to understand that we are all part of the solution. One of the things that really bothers me, and I'm sure many other clergy, is when people come up and they say, where is God? Well, how come God's not getting... What do you think God is? Like some Superman who's going to come out of the clouds? I mean, if that's what you believe, you've seen too many movies, We think that God's going to come and get the bad guys and get the good guys. And who does that? Santa Claus, right? Right? He gives a piece of coal to the bad guys, gives gifts to the good guys. That's Santa Claus. God's not a Santa Claus. Unfortunately, when you start thinking like that, what you're doing is you're passing along responsibility. You know who's responsible for this world? We are. We brought it to this place. Let's take some responsibility by being sensitive, by understanding that we all need to change our heart. We need to fill it with love. We need to be able to communicate with one another. We need to be able to understand the pain of others. We need to be able to walk in the shoes of others to understand that pain. What in Armenian we say, tzavatanim. Let me understand your pain. Let me take your pain. Let me feel your pain. And in feeling, then you start sensitizing yourself to the needs of others. That yes, that mother's child is also important in my life, not just to her, because eventually we're all here on this planet. I want to thank you for joining me. I got to get going to church right now. We're going to be praying together. Pray for me, okay? This is like, never done this before. I thought I'd do a pre-church little sermon get ready, and I'd love to hear from you. Take care. God bless you.